Welcome to a Prevention is Cure podcast with me, Prof. Schofield, and
me, Kayla Len-Fernadella-Mott.
The Pre-Cure R&D team. Today, Kayla, is such a cool topic. We've just been amping, and we're so amping to share this stuff with you. It's a sort of accidental topic. So a couple of podcasts ago, we did some stuff on vitamin D.
Yep.
And, you know, that we've been supplementing with that, the importance of sun.
Yep.
And the reason I got into this is I'm supposed to be the chair of the scientific committee for the Australasian Metabolic Health Society, which I've been doing a pretty shit job on. But I was going to do a position statement for this society on vitamin D at the upcoming Low Carb Down Under meeting in Brisbane, and sort of running out of time for that, frankly. But then I've sort of got slightly sidetracked, because there's actually quite a lot of stuff on vitamin D and reviews and all that. But given I was going to a nutrition conference and there's metabolic aspects, I thought I'll get more into the metabolic aspects. And then I've sort of got sidetracked into how what you eat particularly affects your skin. Yep. And your propensity to get burnt, and then your skin cancer risk. And so based on my own curiosity, actually, because what I had noticed anecdotally is that when I change my diet, particularly if I'm fasting or I'm keto, then I seem to be more protected against sunburn. You know, basically I'm pretty dark skinned anyway, and I don't easily sunburn, but you know I can. And when I'm eating really well and really strict on a sort of keto diet, then I just don't get sunburn. Even with a reasonable amount of exposure. So am I still at risk? And I think the answer is yes, and I'll tell you why. But can what you eat provide some protection? And the answer is yes. And the last thing that we're going to look at today, which I was really interested in, is there's a lot of talk, especially in the communities I know, about sunscreens, especially the ones that get absorbed. There's sort of UV filter ones. They go into your skin and then into your, actually it turns out, into every tissue in your body, including your blood, your unborn child, your unborn child through your ovaries or your sperm or whatever as well. So you've got all that going on. And we'll talk about the evidence for that, which is, there's a big review just come out and it's surprising, isn't it?
Oh, I think for me, in terms of, when we talk about exposure, we often talk about like ultra-processed food and the non-food chemicals that you get exposed to through that. I mean, the skin is the biggest organ and we're putting sun cream all over ourselves, and so the exposure is just tenfold.
Yeah, and we'll see what that means. It's really interesting. Okay, so let's make a start. We've got a few topics that weave together. Let's start with this vitamin D recap in general.
Yeah, so like, what is vitamin D and why is it so important? It's probably the first question we should just quickly cover off.
Yeah, I think we've done that in a previous podcast, but the thing is, it's used in all sorts of processes around the body, whether it be insulin signaling and transport, or in immune function, in bone formation and non-formation. And so vitamin D really came to attention and to sort of older age fractures and bone health fragility, and people were noticing that some oldies were really prone to having weak bones and fracturing easily, which is a pretty gnarly thing, like a hip fracture. Could be the end of your life, really. Yes. Because it's the beginning of the end, and there's interesting data on that. And they noticed that they were really low in vitamin D, and actually those populations are low anyway for a whole bunch of reasons. You're not so good at making vitamin D as you get older. There's about a 13% loss in ability to synthesize it from the sun for every decade of life.
That's massive.
Yeah, it sounds worse than it is though, because it doesn't go to zero. So I think a healthy 30-year-old is about twice as good as a healthy 70-year-old. So a healthy 70-year-old is still doing something, but half as well. Yeah. So, but yes, a big effect. And then you take into account that a lot of dark-skinned people now don't live at their phenotypic latitude. That's a great word.
That's a great word. I was just pondering on how good of a word that was.
In other words, their phenotype was evolved near the equator, and now they're living in Dunedin or Hobart or something. And so they're prone to that. We've had a lot of sun safe messages, and some public health campaigns have worked really well. So that's done that, got people out of the sun, but got them vitamin D deficient. So that bone health stuff came out, and then we noticed that kids who are pretty hard to keep sufficient in vitamin D, could be up to half of kids, and particularly if you're an obese kid, because fat sequests vitamin D, and you might get it, but it's not available now because it's in the fat cells. 50 or 100% of some kids, 100% of obese Korean boys are vitamin D deficient.
I love the word that we were just reading in one of the papers. What was it? Hypovitaminosis D. So low levels of vitamin D, and we were just having a giggle about how academics just sometimes make up some great words.
Oh yeah, well, some other classic ones in that genre are hyperinsulinemia, high insulin.
Yes.
And hyperferritinemia,
yes,
which is something you suffer from.
It sure is.
High iron.
High iron.
Yeah, but you can't just say high iron.
No. Why would we make things that simple?
When you can use one word, hyperferritinemia. Okay, we're distracted. So back to vitamin D. So the prevalence of deficiency or insufficiency is high. The effects on health are big.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about bone health, but it's and immune function, but cardiovascular health, metabolic health, and we'll get into this sort of bidirectional downward spiral when it comes to metabolic health and vitamin D in a little bit, and even mental health, like mood regulation. So you've got these far-sweeping impacts from one vitamin.
And then you see, well, people aren't getting in the sun as much. You can get it from diet, from animal-based stuff, oily fish and cheeses and other things, meats, but not in the quantities that we're talking about. So, really it's synthesized by blue wave light in the sun. And now we might be in temperate climates. There's quite a big seasonal effect, which is part of the seasonal affective disorder, I guess, and part of winter weight gain.
Yep.
So maybe you can supplement it. And, there is evidence for that helping around getting it sufficient again. So there's interesting things in even weight loss, which it doesn't help with weight loss per se, but as an augmentative treatment, I think adjunctive, I think is the right word.
Yes.
It can help.
Yes.
And so if your vitamin D is low and the supplement helps raise it, then you lose more weight and keep it off more. I think there was a study with overweight women on diets. I don't know what the diets actually were, but that's an interesting thing. So it's involved in weight loss. Why don't we talk about that vicious cycle?
I was just thinking, can we talk about that? Because we're talking about supplementation, but when, weight and metabolic syndrome is at play, maybe obesity, and we were talking just now about the fact that, vitamin D gets sequestered, eaten up by the fat cells, so you can't access it. So what happens if I am overweight or I've got some metabolic issues and then I supplement? Am I going to get these beneficial effects?
Yeah, so the more overweight you are, the harder it is to supplement.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible. It's just that the interesting thing is the sort of over-the-shelf recommendations for supplementation are like there's 1,000 international units or 2,000 international units. You might take 2 tablets. That's what's available. When you look at the actual published research and clinical data, people are supplementing way more than that, and actually reasonably safely, although there is such a thing as vitamin D toxicity. They're taking 20,000, 50,000 units either in a single go or chronically. And so once you start to get up to that level, then that overcomes the weight issues, and you're a bit slower, but you get enough, so that's all good. But it is a bit of an issue. Like vitamin D levels are really critical for health and metabolic health and maintaining a healthy weight and all that sort of stuff. But the fatter you are, the harder it is to get it. If you get metabolic syndrome, and particularly type 2 diabetes, now you've got more inflammation, and so if you're more inflamed, you're sort of pre-cooked. So to speak, when you get out into the sun, so it's like putting yourself in the microwave for 2 minutes, then going sunbathing.
Yep.
No, that's a bad.
That's not a great analogy.
No, so then you've got a double problem, and people will know that they, maybe burn a bit more easily. And if they got themselves in shape, maybe they wouldn't. That would be an interesting thing.
Right.
I don't know if people have noticed that. Let's move off that topic. We've got plenty more to talk about here.
So we're saying that vitamin D, and we've talked about this in previous podcasts, right? It's something that you can get from the diet, but tricky you can get from supplementation. But then the other key place that we get it from is from the sun. And as you alluded to at the beginning, one of the most successful public health messages and campaigns is around sun safety. And so should we get into that and sort of the impacts that that's now had far more reaching than just, vitamin D?
Yeah, I came into this podcast and researching this with quite a ambivalent attitude about worrying too much about sun exposure.
Yeah.
Like somehow I was immune to that. Well, I got dark skin, I got a good diet, and we'll see how that's related and whatnot. But actually, I'd seen a paper, I don't know, from the 1990s that outdoor workers in Australia were at lower risk of all cancers than indoor workers. But it's so confounded, actually. If you look at all the data, look, UVB, the sort of sun that will burn you from the midday, the more exposure you get to that, the higher your risk of all of the different skin cancers are. Just even the basal cell carcinomas and the SSCs, but also the melanoma, which is obviously the deadly one to worry about. I mean, they can all be problematic, but it is a thing.
Yeah.
And I'd say, first of all, don't get sunburnt. Like that seems to be a particular risk, but chronic exposure to UVB is a risk, and so you need to balance that with your need to manufacture vitamin D. I think we've got some really good ideas about how you can balance that, right? And also, just another little feature is if you do get sunburnt, you're actually depleting your vitamin D anyway, so it's pointless. So that's a and you're depleting it through a mechanism which we're going to talk about right now, which is that vitamin D actually gets used up when you get sunburnt.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about that.
Well, so that's that paper that we were reading earlier, where a single high dose, like I think they're saying between 50,000 and 600,000, how do you even take that much? Units of vitamin D after a single exposure to sunburn, and they did a study with 20 people that they sunburned, reduces sunburn by quite a lot. And it does that because the inactive form goes in, but it's actually converted to an active form in the skin.
Yes.
And combines with some other retinols and things like that to actually go and mop up the mess. Have you still got that thing?
I've still got it.
Okay.
So we were trying to make sense of this, and we said, we'll pop it into ChatGPT and see what ChatGPT has to say. And here's the lay summary from ChatGPT. When you take a huge dose of vitamin D3, your body and the sunburned skin get flooded with inactive vitamin D3. Your skin cells and immune cells then convert it into the active form, which teams up with other molecules made by the UV exposure. Together, they turn those angry attack mode macrophages into calm cleanup mode ones, shutting down inflammation and speeding up healing.
Hang on, did you cut out the first bit?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe.
Remember, it came back to you like going, remember that time you got roasted like a lobster?
Oh, yes, it did say something along those lines.
Yeah.
Remember that one time you got roasted like a lobster? This is what happens when, there we go. No, sorry, can't find it.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing, but we're not advocating for that.
Yeah.
It's just showing you that vitamin D is involved in sunburn cleanup and mitigate some of the damage to it, and you can actually take a really high dose of it. God knows where you'd get that from, because you'd have to get a prescription, but that's possible. So that's interesting. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, what's the evidence that what you eat affects your risk of skin cancers and or sunburns and cell damage? And we've got a few different areas. Let's deal with the usual way of doing this, which is the nurses' health study and the big epidemiology to start with. What have we got there?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So most people know about the nurses' health study. It's one of the longest going, largest epidemiological studies out. So this data was published in 2018. So remember here, we're not talking causation, we're talking correlation. And what they found is that when people had diets that had lots of O6, so polyunsaturated fat, they had an increased risk of all types of skin cancer. And when they had a diet that was higher in O3, so omega-3 fatty acids from things like fish, they had a decreased risk of all skin cancers, which I think is just interesting in of itself, right?
Well, the mere fact in that study there's a detectable effect at all,
Yeah.
because these studies are so confounded with a healthy user bias after 20 years have been told them that polyunsaturated fats are good for them,
Yeah.
which they sort of are because the omega-3 ones are protective, but the omega-6 ones, which proliferate, that's what we call industrial seed oils, are high in those. They're associated with more skin cancer. So there's a signal there. That's interesting, not good enough, but there's other interesting human and animal studies. Let's have a look at that.
Yeah, so I think the next one that's interesting is a paper that talks about fatty acid composition of the membrane bilayers and the importance of diet, polyunsaturated fat balance. So what this paper found, and this was a mouse paper, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that most fats had no impact on the phospholipid bilayer, and I'll let Grant talk about what that phospholipid bilayer is in just a moment. But really what did matter was the amount of O3, O6, that ratio in the diet, and that impacted the shape and the structure of that phospholipid bilayer.
Okay, so translation of that is that every cell in your body has to be held together by something.
Yep.
It's got a cell wall, and that's called the phospholipid bilayer. So it's 2 layers of lipids, fats. And they vary in structure depending on what you actually eat. So you are literally what you eat, especially in terms of fat. And so there's really 3 things that make this up. So you can have saturated fats in there.
Yep.
And the interesting thing about saturated fats is they're quite rigid and very stable. And this is because they're a straight carbon molecule, they pack together like bricks.
Yeah, you think of your blocks of butter, right?
Well, like the block of butter, but the fact that New Zealand winter temperature, it's solid, is because the molecules fit together right next to each other.
Yeah.
And so saturated fat can be stable but rigid, but that's actually that's good because they're protected against oxidation. That doesn't oxidize very easily. But you need some fluidity because you need to get stuff across the membranes as well. That's where polyunsaturated fats come in. And so they can be omega-3, which tend to be a longer chain and more stable. And this is you sort of fish oils and stuff. They're better under heat and other things, so they don't really get blown up. Or omega-6s, which tend to be less stable. Their double bonds are more easily broken and they're more easily oxidized. And depending on what you eat, it changes the composition, which is so interesting. So and there's a massive range, right? And there are human studies on this as well. I know we found a mouse study, but there are human studies. If you eat a diet high in seed oils, high in omega-6s, then every cell in your body has more omega-6s in it and is now more prone to oxidation. And of course, that includes your skin cells because that's just an organ.
Yeah.
It just happens to be outward facing, but it's also the thing that meets the UVB light and can be damaged by it. So it's more easily oxidized under those conditions. So that's an interesting thing.
So the 60-second summary is that the type of fat that you eat impacts those phospholipid bilayers, and that can make you more prone to being sunburned, right?
Yep. So we should have a look at these 2 mouse studies. We'll tell you what's good and bad about them, but it's so interesting. So I think we'll take the one from 2008 first because it's easier to understand.
Yep.
So first of all, just to contextualise what happens in both these studies, they've got hairless albino mice.
Yep.
You can look up on the internet, little pink, ratty-looking things. So it's gnarly. You've come out on the wrong side of the birth cohort to start with. But you're also a lab mouse, and in these studies, you're a skin cancer model. So they irradiate you, so they expose you, they sunburn you. In the 1988 study, they got sunburned 5 days a week for 300 days. Pretty gnarly.
It's a rough lot in life.
Yes. Yeah, and the other 1988 lot, I think, got only sunburnt twice a week, but for about the same amount of time.
Yes, yeah.
Whew.
Yep.
Stink.
That is not great.
And okay, so that first study, from memory, they changed the amount of omega-6 and omega-3 fats that they had in their diet, because you can just do that. And so just remember, they're still getting rat chow, which is a pretty shit diet. It's like still 50% sugar.
Yeah.
But they changed the the ratio of omega-3 and omega-6s, and there's a massive effect. I think you got the results there.
I sure do. So here's what they found. The omega-3, so the one was higher in that sort of fish oil diet, dramatically reduced skin cancer. So what they found was tumors appeared later, about 4 weeks slower. The number dropped by half or more, depending on the type of skin cancer they were looking at. So the greatest drop was 64%, and that was for papillomas, and then the smallest drop, almost half still, was for carcinomas, and that was a reduction of 46%. The size of the tumors was also much smaller, like a lot smaller. So the tumor size shrank in the papillomas by 98% and the carcinomas by 83%. So it's taking longer for tumors to appear. The number of them is far less, and the size of them is far smaller. And that's just from changing the proportion of fat in the diet from lots of O6 to lots of O3.
Yeah, so it didn't completely protect them. They still got skin cancers, but they appeared later smaller. But they were getting pretty gnarly exposure. They were at risk. They're hairless albino mice, for goodness sake, they can't get out of the sun, or whatever they were irradiating them with.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. So is that applicable to humans? Well, yeah, we're not hairless albino mice. We're not eating mouse chow, and we're not getting over that time frame sunburn. But yeah, it still sends an interesting signal. The other one's even more interesting, that 1988 one.
Yes.
Oh, wow. It's a crazy study.
So they were irradiating these mice every day, 5 days a week for 300 days, pretty high exposure. And what they did is that the total fat content, again, didn't really matter if the calories were held constant. So if mice had 5% or 20% from polyunsaturated fat.
There's three conditions.
Oh, yeah. Okay, do you want to go into 3 conditions first?
So they got 5%. They all got the same calories.
Yes.
One group got 5% polyunsaturated omega-6 fatty acids as the fat. Another group got the same fat, but 20% this time.
Yeah.
Now, these guys all got skin cancers.
Yes.
And that developed reasonably fast, and then just keep going up the long way. Eventually everyone got it.
Yeah.
And whether you got the 5% or 20%, it didn't matter. There was really no difference. You got the skin cancers.
Yes.
Now, the other group, they gave them saturated fat. They actually gave them something pretty disgusting, which was hydrogenated
sunflower
oil, which is a way of saturating it.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's fair enough because they got other versions of the sunflower oil in the other condition. Anyway, what happened there? This is the kicker.
This is the kicker. They were almost completely protected from getting any visible UV-induced tumours during the test period. So whereas the mice on the 5% and the 20% polyunsaturated got the tumours.
Yeah, and then there was, have you got the notes there about that when they said, they then fed them the polyunsaturated stuff afterwards, and then they all developed tumours because they had the precursor to the tumours, but they were protected from them. And when they started to feed them the polyunsaturated fats, they started to develop the tumours. And this has led to a whole hypothesis. It hasn't really advanced much in 40 years, but probably still exists, that somehow seed oils, omega-6 seed oils, are a requirement in the pathway to develop all types of skin cancers. Now, I don't know about that, but it's an interesting idea. Now, just before everyone goes away, I was like, choice, I'm just going to eat butter and I'll be protected against skin cancers.
Because that's exactly where my brain went, right? Like all the polyunsaturateds out, they go, I'm just going to have saturated and I'll be fine.
Well, that's where I was yesterday.
Yeah.
Until I realised that the 5% seed oil group still developed the same amount. And I don't know if it's possible to be a human and avoid all omega-6 fatty acids, nor do you want to, because they're actually essential fatty acids.
Yeah.
So I don't know about that.
So if we're going to have them, we're going to be exposed to the sun, what else can we do? Can we get into the topic of sunscreen?
Well, hang on, let's just wrap up the diet stuff.
Yeah.
So fat quality matters. So I think there is evidence, and there's enough evidence to make it a thing, that high amounts of omega-6 predispose you to more skin cancer risk. So reducing seed oils is likely to be, there's a lot of talk about seed oils, especially in the low carb type communities. They're bad for this, they're bad for that, and I probably agree. They probably are, but the evidence is so limited. But actually, in the skin area, I think it's probably starting to get there.
Yeah.
So I think for your skin health and prevention of that, don't get sunburn in the first place, for goodness sake. But you can get more exposure without getting damaged or burnt by maintaining higher omega-3s, and probably a bit more saturated fat might help.
Yeah.
That's probably still to be decided. But certainly getting those omega-6s down seems to be a really important thing.
So if I'm listening to this podcast and I go, right, Prof Grant, love that. How do I get more omega-3 and less omega-6? How do I change that ratio in my diet?
Well, first of all, you need to stop cooking. And if you go out, particularly ask them to stop cooking with basically sunflower oil or rice bran oil, which is whatever they use, because every restaurant known to humankind doesn't do that. They could just cook their meat and stuff in butter or lard or tallow or ghee or some coconut oil. That would all be better.
Yep.
So that's a good start, because I think that's a major source.
So change your cooking oil, and if you're going out, request better oil.
Yep. Wild animals have heaps better ratio of omega-3 to omega-6, especially wild caught fish are completely different than farmed fish, because remember, the trouble is for a farmed salmon, you're feeding it fish pellets that are high in omega-6 fatty acids, so you are what you eat, so the fish is an omega-6 fish. And the same's probably true for many cows. I'm not sure about New Zealand cows with grass and stuff. I imagine they're pretty good.
Yeah, I was going to just say, the issue would probably be the grain finished or grain fed animals.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably someone listening to this podcast smarter than us knows about that. But that's probably the
main two things you can do.
Things. And I'm going to have all ultra processed food tends to have a lot of hydrogenated vegetable oil.
Yeah.
Partially hydrogenated is the problem, that as well. That's just yuck.
Yeah.
So it's not a great thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last thing we wanted to finish this off with is, it's like, well, you can eat your way to better skin health and be a bit more protected, but you're still going to get eventually fried.
Yeah.
So put a shirt on or a hat on, or just go out of the sun eventually, and if you think you're going to burn.
Yeah.
But if we got into the sunscreen stuff, and I'd been listening to a bunch of dermatologists, and it was the first time I've heard anyone go, oh yeah, there's now increasing evidence for these absorbed sunscreens and health outcomes, and actually these mineral sunscreens might be the thing. So let's have a look at that, because there's a 2025 review.
Yes.
That's, I don't know, it's 50 pages long. It's pretty comprehensive, and we really liked it.
Yeah, I think what really stood out there for me was the fact that those mineral-based sun creams are not getting absorbed into basically every part of the body, whereas these UVB ones are. And it's not even just that they're, crossing into your own tissue; they're getting passed on to sperm cells, into breast milk. So there's this this transgenerational effect that we're seeing as well. The same sort of effect that we often see with things like BPAs.
Okay, so one step back, you can get zinc oxide.
Yep.
It's like I looked it up on bargainchemist.co, not that I've got anything to do with them, but you can get a visible zinc.
Yes.
Put it on you, it goes on, it stays on. You've now got zinc oxide covering your skin. It's a physical barrier to UVB, and the same's true for titanium oxide.
Yep.
They're not getting absorbed, you're not absorbing zinc or titanium into you, then they just eventually come off, and there's, when we were kids, we used to have bright orange ones and blue stuff and all that. That seems to have gone out of fashion, and you just, the invisible stuff just goes on. Although you can still see it.
Yes.
Who cares? So that's cool. It's going to stop you getting sunburn, and it doesn't go into your skin. All the other sunscreens, so you go into the Surf Lifesaving Club, which I do, and the free sunscreen they provide, you rub it in, and that's interesting. Mm-hmm. And it goes into your blood, into your skin, into every organ in your body. And when you have a look at this paper, there's 18 odd chemicals that of various qualities that are not things that have normally appeared in human tissue. And it turns out when you do a review of all the studies like these guys have done, and really comprehensive, this stuff's not very good for you.
Yeah. And so what sorts of health outcomes is it related to?
Well, you see things like testosterone in adolescent boys, sperm quality and quantity in all males, a whole bunch of female sex hormone and other disruptions, thyroid disruption, birth weight and other things, cognitive things, even transgenerationally in animal and human studies. It's an astonishing thing. I would have to say, I was more than surprised about that. And now, so how am I changing my behaviour?
Yeah.
I'm actually going out of my way to make sure I don't get sunburnt.
Yes.
Now, so I'm going to buy some zinc oxide stuff and put it particularly on my face because it's the hardest thing to get out if you're out running or biking, that sort of stuff. I'm not going to stop exposing myself to sun though. I'm going to eat a diet, my clean diet, and have an extra focus on getting the omega-6s down because they are harmful, I think in this case. But I'm not going to the surf club and putting that shit on. And I'm going to try and get the rest of my family to avoid doing that. It's actually a thing. And people have been saying that on the fringe for a few years now. And people have been going, oh, yeah, in nutcases, sunburnt. But I think you want to balance that against...
a little bit of healthy skepticism.
Well, there's a bunch of chemicals that get into your body that aren't meant to be there, and there's now demonstrable harm from that. So I've definitely learned something in the process of preparing for this podcast.
Yeah, as have I. I mean, much like Grant, I have heard whisperings on the fringe for a couple of years and gone, oh, well, sun cream's good for you, you should put it on, la, 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 la. The benefits outweigh the harms. But I think actually after doing the research for this podcast, I've done a 180 flip and the harms outweigh the benefits of, I would go zinc. I wouldn't go with anything that's being provided. But if I'm a parent sitting at home listening to this podcast and little Johnny's going to school and they're lathering him up with whatever they've just got provided there, or to swim lessons, or to surf lifesaving.
Yeah, that's right. How much do you become an utter parent, or do you actually insist on that? Well, yeah, every parent will draw their line, but yeah, that's an interesting thing. Yeah. All right, well, that's it, I think, on the skin health stuff. It's interesting stuff. It's
interesting stuff. So some good takeaways there at the end about some behaviours that you can do to set yourself up for the best possible outcomes, I guess.
All right. Well, that's the Preventionist Cure podcast over and out.